We're live. We're back. We are on location with Todd and Kelsey and also with Jason Hewlett. Congrats on having some amazing work coming up shortly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're here to talk about some of that. So you've been doing some investigations or some work into the Wendigo. Is that how it's pronounced?
The Wendigo. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
It was born out of something. I did a film and documentary a few years ago for Small Town Monsters called Cursed Waters. Okay. And the book was called Legend of Ogopogo. And then the movie was like, the book was a tie-in to the movie that I filmed with director Eli Watson. And I was looking into like exploring the whole legend of the Ogopogo and sort of the whole cultural misappropriation of it, etc. And so between the finishing of that work and the movie coming out, I was talking with Eli and he asked me, so what book are you writing next? I hadn't thought about it, really. I kind of had been doing some research into the Cadborosaurus, which is a sea monster off the coast of British Columbia, and I was looking into the Wendigo. And I just blurted out, like, the Wendigo! I'm doing a book on the Wendigo! And he's like, oh, you should talk to Heather. Heather is a researcher and producer at Small Town Monsters who released Cursed Waters. Because he's like, we're planning to do a Wendigo movie. Oh. And I'm like, oh, well, that's synchronicity.
Yeah.
And it kind of just went from there. And it was just a matter, like, I've always been interested in the Wendigo. It was something as a kid I learned about while reading an old Incredible Hulk comic, which you and I talked about before going on. And I just thought it was a comic book character. Because it was the first issue with Wolverine, and it was set in Canada, and the cover had, like, you know, old green skin slugs it out with the weird way out Wendigo in Canada. And it looked like a hairy white Sasquatch with a tail. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was a comic book character. And I would draw it, like I drew my own Wendigo pictures because I thought it was like the coolest looking comic book villain. And then many years later, I discovered it's not a comic book creation. It's actually a very true Canadian folk story. And so that just kind of became the opportunity to write a book about it and then, you know, work on a film about it. That became the impetus for just doing all this research.
Very cool. So it's I didn't realize that it was necessarily a Canadian myth or whatever you would call that. Where does the history date back to as far as you've been able to kind of uncover?
There is no fixed origin point for it, but it's predominantly an Algonquin Cree myth. Mm-hmm. And basically the belief, this is the thing that's fascinating about it, because Supernatural, the TV show, did an episode like 20 years ago with the Wendigo in it. And that's kind of where it really jumped into modern pop culture. But yeah, it goes back like thousands of years. And it started off being more of a state of being you would enter. Like if you were part of the tribe and you took more than you needed and were being greedy and selfish, you went Wendigo. And what would happen basically as the story progressed is you became possessed by this spirit, and the spirit would make you see your friends and your family as food, basically. And eventually he would just kill and eat them. But you had to do something wrong, be weak of character or spirit for this to take you over. And so where this story took this real turn was with the Swift Runner, which was the late 1800s. And he was a tracker in northern Alberta that basically showed up at St. Albert at one of the Catholic churches there, saying that, you know, his family was dead and, you know, it was a bad winter and he was in a bad state. And over time, while he stayed there, he would start screaming out that the spirit of the Wendigo is trying to get into his room at night and take him over. And what they basically learned is that he had murdered and eaten his entire family. He was taken to Fort Saskatchewan, where he was the first person legally hung in Western Canada by the Northwest Mounted Police. And it's actually a documented Canadian criminal case. Right. And that's where the story really jumped from this Indigenous story into Western culture.
I wasn't sure if it was like more of a creature or more of a spirit, but from what you're describing, it sounds more like it's either a spirit.
It's never been depicted as a flesh and blood creature until Algernon Blackwood, he was an author and broadcaster, wrote a book called The Wendigo. Before that, it just took you over and you did these things. But after that story, it became this separate being. So it's one of those things that has morphed with time. Yeah. Nor did it have the antlers. You know, it's always displayed now with the antlers on its head. Originally, it just was like this white, emaciated, bald creature that looked more like a rake, what people describe as a rake. And now it's this thing with these antlers, and it can be very tall, 8 to 12 feet tall, and sometimes its organs are seen on the outside. Its lips are gone because it's constantly hungry and eating. And if you become get taken over by the Wendigo by consuming human flesh. You become this monster, and you're just doomed to wander the wilds till infinity, until you basically just self-destruct.
Right.
This is what I found so interesting doing the research. This is one of those stories that is, there's nothing good about it. Like, the Wendigo is 100% bad news. And people, even up in northern Alberta, because I went in the spring of 2024 up to northern Alberta, and I worked with Morgan Knudsen, who's a researcher and investigator up there when I was doing my research and some filming. People up there take this story very, very seriously. Like, you don't talk about the Wendigo. You don't even try to think about it. Talking about it can draw it to you. And if you encounter it, nothing good will happen. In fact, your chances of survival are slim. And even down, I was talking with researcher Chad Lewis, who's featured in the book and in the film, and he's out in eastern United States where some of the Algonquin people are there. Like, it's not just Canadian in that sense. Like, they've gone down there. And even down there, like, there's Wendigo sightings and people don't want to talk about it. Like, you avoid the conversation at all costs. There's no good side to a Wendigo. There's nothing positive about it. It is everything that's wrong with us brought into manifestation.
So we all have a purpose in life. What do you think the Wendigo's purpose is?
It's treated very much as a cautionary tale. This is what happens if you are a bad person, if you allow addiction to rule you, if you take things from other people, if you are greedy in any way, shape, or form, if you consume,
brother,
or even if in sense of consume, not just like physically, but you consume more than you need, you are inviting the Wendigo in.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I feel like in our very sort of capitalistic society, where everyone is consuming a lot, we should be seeing more Wendigos than we are.
Well, that's what makes it really predominant. Like it's almost more timely now than ever before, right? And I'm kind of thinking about it. And I've in doing interviews to for the publicity of the film and the book, that comes up a lot in conversation. It's very much a story for now. So I think it's almost timely that I had the opportunity to tell this story at this place, because I look around me and I just see like the worst in people all the time. And just self-centeredness and greed and like not caring about anybody else. And that's all of that is what the Algonquin and Cree believe turns you into a Wendigo.
Right. How did you decide how to start the process of investigating this? Like, what was the first door that you walked through, or the first thing that you pursued?
It started because originally I was just writing the book, and then I would somehow be involved in the film. So I started off, I just started researching as much as I can, reading up on it. And then because the story did originate in northern Alberta, I reached out to Morgan Knudsen because she lives in Edmonton. And I was literally like, hey, Morgan, what do you know about the Wendigo? And she's like, oh, well, the Swift Runner story only happened about an hour and a half north of me in Fort Saskatchewan's in this direction and blah, blah, blah. And I actually knew someone, and we had like what we believe could have been a Wendigo encounter. And so the first thing I did is booked hotel rooms up in Edmonton and went up there and just started researching up there.
Have you ever had fear come over you, like even with your ghost hunting and stuff? Have you ever like...
When you go looking for something like a Wendigo that at this point is now people believe is a physical thing, or you look for something that's like a Sasquatch, which is a physical thing, there's suddenly the physical reality that harm can be done unto you.
Yeah.
We're in the woods. We're in the middle of nowhere. 50 kilometers up a mountain road in the middle of nowhere. And there's this freak snowstorm going on, which we didn't plan for. It wasn't supposed to snow. And you suddenly realize that you're experiencing something that could be real and physical, and you can hear it moving around in the woods. Now, it could have been anything, but the things are adding up that it could have been like a Sasquatch encounter. I'm not saying it was. And suddenly you're like, we're alone. We made the conscious decision that we should probably start walking out because it's like 2 kilometers back to the truck and it's snowing and there's something else here.
As you were investigating, did you dig up anything where you were like, oh, this is interesting. This is a really interesting thread that I kind of want to pursue for a while? Or like, one of the things that I find is interesting when it comes to investigating stuff like that is you don't really know what you're going to find until you find it.
Yeah.
Right? And so did you find anything that was like, oh, this is cool. Let's see where this leads us?
Yeah. Like what really fascinated, other than the fact that like, people still believe it and take it very seriously, which I did was surprised by that. And it was amazing how like when you'd go into places, like people would just look at you like, you're not from here. We know you're not from here. You're in this small town in northern Alberta. They know everybody. Who are you? Kind of thing. And we even had, like, we were investigating a sighting at Mameo Beach, which was an hour and a bit south of Edmonton. And so we went to the sighting site and heard all the story. And then we decided to take this side road that would go down to the beach. That when I was with Morgan and them, they hadn't taken this road down before. We drove down that road, and probably like 20 to 50 meters behind that, through the stand of trees, there was a cemetery. And one of the people with us was Alicia Pearl-Werner, who's of the Cree Nation. And she's like, she was like, that's a surprise. And we went, and it turned out it was an actual burial ground.
Right.
With like, what looked like freshly buried graves to it. And she's like, this, in their belief system, creates a more logical reason why we would have something that we could believe could be a Wendigo sighting, because you're dealing with a spiritual place, right? But while we were wrapping that up, and I put the cameras away, at that point, we were getting ready to leave. This black truck came in from out of nowhere, and I document this in the book. Blows right by us, drives into the middle of the cemetery, turns around, and just the driver just stops and stares at us. And it's a black truck, blacked out windows. And it was a highly unsettling moment. Someone found out that we were there.
Right.
They didn't like us being there.
Interesting.
The other thing that was interesting is how there's a thing called Wendigo psychosis, and it's actually documented in psychiatric journals. Yeah. And it is an attempt to explain what this is. Like, it's very much only a culturally based thing. The only people ever afflicted with Wendigo psychosis are from Algonquin and Cree nations, but it's where they believe that they have been taken over by a Wendigo, and it causes them to consume people. Remember Vince Lee, who murdered that man on the Greyhound bus in Saskatchewan?
Yes, I do.
He had read an article before boarding that bus about the Wendigo.
No way.
Shut up.
Yeah. That's something I learned during my research. And what happened? He killed the person beside him and started eating some of them, putting himself in a bag, putting pieces in a bag.
We don't know that wasn't a Wendigo involvement.
But that's a modern day. That's as
that
close. They did, yeah, with a different name, and
they probably checked to make sure he was free of Wendigos, though.
you would hope.
They
But
did
the fact is that I didn't expect, because I knew of the Vince Lee case.
Yeah.
But the Wendigo connection.
Yeah, no, I
to
didn't
it,
hear that either. But
which was interesting. So that's in the book, and it didn't put it in the film because then you're just dealing with a side topic. Like that was an interesting thing to write a book and then have the honor of kind of taking this book that inspired the film and adapting it yourself and realizing what works and what doesn't work and what you want to put in to keep the narrative flow of the documentary going and not. But I was glad that in the book I could actually really spend some time diving a bit into that and going deeper into Wendigo psychosis than I do in the movie. I talk about it and touch on it, but don't get into as deep.
Protect yourself from...
You don't.
Oh, that's bad news.
There was a sighting reported to me while writing the book in the Paul Lake Pinnetan area. So we decided for the film and part of the book to do an investigation up there. So we're going to go looking for the Wendigo. What do we do if we actually find it? And it's kind of like not a lot. Like you can't do a lot about it if you find it. If it does possess you, your heart literally turns to ice, right? So the only thing you can do when you catch someone, mostly you want to kill them. That's really all that works,
right?
Before they actually fully turn into a Wendigo. So you dismember them. You find the heart. And you basically have to shatter or melt the heart, like thaw the heart out. And then you take all the pieces and you scatter them. And it's crazy. There's been cases, especially a gentleman named Jack Fiddler, Jack and his brother Joseph, that they were, as part of their tribe, they were the Wendigo hunters. So if someone was believed to be becoming possessed or has been possessed by a Wendigo, it was their job to dispatch them.
Okay.
And the only, occasionally, if you did say pour like hot tallow, which is like melted fat and stuff, hot down someone's throat, the thought was that it could melt.
Right.
But think of the harm being done to the person.
So that would be a treatment, so to say?
Yeah.
Wendigoism?
But 99.9% of the time, their solution was they had to kill them. And they had to kill family members. They had to kill people they knew who were believed to be possessed by the Wendigo. Eventually, the Northwest Mounted Police did catch up with them. And there was another legal case about that. And Jack Fiddler actually hung himself before he could be tried. Like it's just, and that's what I think I found the most fascinating is how often this has crossed over into actual true crime, Canadian criminal law.
Interesting.
Which makes it unique.
Are there, like, when it comes to like these Wendigo investigators or hunters or whatever, are there specific things that they look for as far as like a sign that someone is a Wendigo besides just the members of a community going, that's him?
It would be the behavioral patterns, behaving in a more of an aggressive fashion and vocally talking about like, I'm not seeing, my wife who I love. I'm all I see is someone that I want to eat. These people didn't want to be taken. So they'd have like these vivid outbursts of saying the Wendigo is trying to get me. It's coming into my home at night, threatening me.
Do you think there's an element of this that stemmed from kind of these harsher winters where maybe there wasn't a lot of food available and people get hungry?
That's typically when it would happen. Is it would be like during these harsh winters where there's not a lot of game, which is why the psychosis.
Right.
So, idea popped into like people's heads that maybe it's more of a mental health issue than anything else. So that's what I find is so fascinating about it. There's all these different aspects to the Wendigo. So it's not just like someone saw a monster in the woods or in a lake. Like there's a lot more layers to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's leading to like actual crimes, either by people who are, thinking they're Wendigos or people thinking that they're taking out somebody who was a Wendigo. Like there is actual bloodshed coming as a result of that.
Yeah, and it's crossed over into our justice system in the early days frequently.
How did you go from sort of working mostly on the book to becoming more involved in the documentary? How did that transition happen?
So Small Town Monsters would do these series for Kickstarter backers only that was called Cryptid. It was like Cryptid Chupacabra, Cryptid Goatman, and there's going to be Cryptid Wendigo.
Right.
And Eli Watson, who did Chris Waters, was the one behind all of these. And he just, in the end, didn't really enjoy making them. So they were like, well, we'll do something else. Like, they were interested. They bought the rights to the book. So originally, like, Eli was going to come up and he and I were going to make the film last June. And then, for whatever reason, Eli moved on and to do something else instead. And so there was like Seth Breedlove, who runs Small Town Monsters, like, well, maybe I'll come up and do it and we'll just make the thing. And then the project was that the book release and the film was pushed back to 2026. I think it was late last March. I got a text from Seth like one morning and he's like, hey, do you have time for a phone call? And I'm like, sure. And so he calls me up and he's like, so when you went up to Alberta last May, you brought your camera, right? And I'm like, yep. And he says, and you shot a bunch of stuff? And I'm like, yep. And he goes, so how would you like to direct the Wendigo movie and finish the book and have it both come out by Halloween? And then I want you also to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And I was like, okay. Like, without even really thinking about how was I going to accomplish it. And especially this is like April. And the date to have it submitted was by end of August. And so it was this mad dash to figure out how I was going to do it. And then I wanted, because there's certain people I talked to for the book where now you got to get permission to use their story in the film.
Right. Yeah.
That's a whole other part of it. And then you need to kind of backtrack for certain locations I went to in Alberta because I didn't care.
Yeah, you weren't expecting to have to use any of it.
No,
yeah.
And then it's like there's not enough material that I shot in Alberta to make a full feature-length documentary out of. So that's when the idea was we're going to focus a bit more on the Paul Lake Pinatan story, which I touched on a little bit, like in the book, like I said, and I sort of filmed a little bit of, not thinking, because I didn't know if I'd need footage or not, or if they wanted any of the stuff I shot or not. And so that investigation becomes the wraparound story upon which I ended up telling the rest of the Wendigo stuff that I learned in Edmonton. And it worked out that we could go up and do a nighttime investigation. And so you got all the stuff that people like in these things, which is like the boots on the ground, night vision cameras and doing stuff that looks really exciting and dramatic, which is kind of like the last 25 minutes of the film. And it also makes up the beginning. And then you've got like the traditional documentary research, headshot interviews, going to certain locations, revisiting things. And then I worked with an editor named Jason Morris, and he did a really great job of, through the conversations that we had, of making everything work. Because there's certain things I realized when it was finished, I just had holes in that I couldn't film. I had no way to kind of go and do transitional stuff. So how are we going to do that? And we just figured out a way to make it work. And it worked, I think.
How did you feel like when you watched it? I know for myself, like as a filmmaker, it can be different from when you're looking at it from a creation perspective. What were your thoughts on it when you did finally sort of watch it as almost as much as an audience member as you can be?
Yeah, I was surprised, like, because the first cut was like more than 3 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we cut it down to like an hour and 43 minutes. That includes credits, end credits and stuff like that. And I was really, again, surprised because I've watched it like 100 times. Like you say, more scrutiny, that it actually moved quick with the running time. I wasn't bored, even though I knew everything that was coming. Like there was no more surprises. I could see how someone would find it interesting. And that's the big part. The feedback I've got so far is that they found the history of it fascinating. And there was the information I provided. People really liked that. and it got them asking questions and stuff.
Right.
And then they liked some of the other, more adventure aspects of the story and stuff like that. So that's good. So I feel I did my job.
Yeah.
Especially for making it, I call it like filmmaking in reverse. Because usually when you start on a documentary, you just start putting it all together from scratch, and you figure out kind of what you want to do and everything. Is where I kind of did. This is what I have to work with.
Yeah.
And now I've got to figure out a way to make it a feature length and tell a coherent narrative.
You already had all the footage. It was now a matter
Bits and
of
pieces, and then needing to add more to it and
Yeah.
see how to flesh it out.
Flow.
And flow, because initially, like when I kind of, the 3 hour plus cut, like it flowed, but there was just stuff. It's like it started to get bogged down because I was trying to tell too much. And you need to pick, even though it's a documentary, you got to pick a story.
For sure. Yeah.
And you got to pick your characters, the people that kind of are the most important.
Are there any like mystical creatures you don't believe in?
I think the world is so much more interesting with the possibility that these things could be there. Like, I don't know if I believe in everything that comes up. And I think people take things like the Wendigo and twist it into other things. You know what I mean? They'll say like a skinwalker and a Wendigo are the same thing, and they're not.
Right.
And I think I'm open to all this. I think it's all fascinating. But
I think too, like when it comes to something like a Wendigo, you have the question of like, there's obviously the Wendigo in the sense of people have gone crazy and eaten their family members.
They've gone Wendigo.
So they've gone Wendigo. So like that's a real thing.
It's a real thing.
But like, is there an actual spiritual force that's forcing them to guide them, or is there an antlered thing that's roaming the woods? That's a different question.
I don't think there's an antlered thing roaming the woods.
Right.
I don't. And so to answer your question that way, Kelsey, I don't believe in an actual physical Wendigo.
Right.
We went looking for one.
You think there's more of like a spirit of one?
Yeah, or it is a psychological place that you can end up.
I saw the Hat Man.
Did you? See, and that's something that's been reported quite a bit.
I didn't know it was a thing until like recently.
Who is the Hat Man?
He kind of looks like a cutout of like Dick Tracy. He's got like a kind of a cowboy hat, but not. It's more of a detective hat.
Yeah, the fedora style hat.
And then like I believe he's in a trench coat, but it's all black.
Yeah. There's no features to it. It's just black.
It's just a memory of mine that I've had since I was like maybe grade 1, and I'm in bed, and it's second floor, but I looked out my window and he was just like, do 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 do.
Just walking by.
I remember that.
Is this like an actual like myth, or
It's an actual phenomenon that people are experiencing.
I didn't know that until recently, and I was like, oh my God, I saw that guy.
We actually had a report of a Hat Man sent to us, like Canadian Paranormal Society. We had report of one, sent to us.
Do you have a favorite story that we haven't touched on yet from the book that isn't in the documentary that you might want to share, or maybe a favorite story that didn't make it into either?
There is also the story of Napanen.
Okay.
It was another Algonquin Cree gentleman. It's in the book. It's not in the film. It was one of the ones that we just had to kind of let it go. He and his family were traveling to Trout Lake from wherever their camp was. Same thing. Napanen just started hearing things on the trail. Started believing he was seeing something. Started to say that to his wife and family that you aren't safe. Like, you should go on ahead, and I'm going to stay here and try to deal with this kind of thing. And so the family and everything went ahead to Trout Lake, and he stayed behind. Then when he showed up, sometime later, it might have been a couple days, he was behaving very erratically. Savage. Started talking about how everyone around him was food, kind of thing. The people at the Trout Lake tried tying him up. He could break his bonds. He was suddenly exhibited like superhuman strength. He was super strong. And in the end, the same thing. They had to kill him.
Crazy.
And bury the body. So, and all those stories, and that's the thing. There's very few that you hear about of people being saved. There was also a case at Charles Camsell Hospital in Edmonton, which I left out of the film because when we went there to film, they'd started tearing the hospital down and building condos. So, but apparently at the hospital, Morgan Knudsen had heard a story that there was an exorcism conducted at the hospital on a female patient that said she was being possessed by a Wendigo. So they actually tried to do an exorcism on her to exorcise the spirit of the Wendigo.
I guess maybe going back to Kelsey's question about other like creatures and cryptids and that sort of thing. Are there any, of those sort of things that you haven't pursued an investigation of that you would like to?
I mentioned the Cadborosaurus earlier. I think that's something one day I'd love to work on.
The Cadbury
It's called the Cadborosaurus. So you know the Cadboro Bay?
No.
Okay, there's Cadboro Bay on Vancouver Island.
Okay, now we know.
There's a sea monster that lives off the coast of British Columbia that has been seen for like hundreds, thousands of years. And that's something that I would really like to look into, much like I did with Ogopogo. The trick is you're looking for something on the ocean, so you need the resources to get the boat and all this stuff.
Sure.
But I think that would be fascinating to work on that.
Could they technically be the same thing, just different names?
Yeah, and I really like the descriptions of the Cadborosaurus are actually very similar to the descriptions of the traditional Ogopogo sort of thing, and even what's being seen in other lake monsters. So I think if it's a real thing, it's of the same species, right? I don't think all this stuff can be there's all these different species of weird things out there.
Right.
I think they've got to be similar enough to be part of the same
There could
thing.
be like underground caves where it's just like one guy going around.
Oh, or like you've got to think, like actually from the Pacific Ocean, they're in a roundabout way, you get up into Lake Okanagan by thinking of the Columbia River and a few other rivers and that kind of thing.
He's just one sea monster that likes messing with people.
Or a small group of species that travels about. Like messing with people. And if you believe the indigenous people, all of the lakes in British Columbia are connected by underground tunnels.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I believe it.
And there's nothing to say it couldn't be. But I think that's what I'd really like to look into. And I mean, stuff like Mothman I find really interesting.
Mothman comes around when there's something bad is about
That's
to happen.
that's the story. Yeah, it's like a harbinger of doom. Like they apparently saw it before 9/11 and they saw it before Chernobyl. And obviously the Point Pleasant story, they saw it for like months leading up to the collapse of the bridge, which was also documented.
Is there a theory behind why he shows up prior to things, or?
No, this just seems to be the pattern,
Maybe
right?
he's in charge of it.
John Keel wrote a book, The Mothman Prophecies book.
I have heard of that.
It's a great book. It's a great book.
It made into a movie.
The movie's not so good.
Like Richard Gere.
Yeah, it's okay, but it deviates so much from like the Keel's book tries to get into all that phenomenon. Why? So I think that's interesting. I don't think anyone's seen one in Canada.
Yeah, something else I was curious about is like the Mothman kind of restricted to certain geographic areas, generally speaking, or
Not that I know of. Like we've seen in Chernobyl, it obviously is no trouble going to Russia.
So, did you have a crazy experience when you were a young boy, and did that just do something to you, and that's why you are the way you are now?
Yeah, when I was growing up, I probably about 5, and we were going to pick up a buddy of mine who was coming over for a sleepover, my mom and I. And so we drove to their place, and for whatever reason, she got out to go to the door, and I stayed in the car. And I remember looking out the back of the hatchback, so the window at the street, North Shore Street here in Kamloops. No one's on the street. And then suddenly this face pops up in the back. And the way I described it is it looked like Jason Voorhees without the hockey mask, like that kind of deformed Mongolish face. And it popped up and and then it disappeared.
Shut up.
Like that quick, just boom. And I dropped to the floor and I didn't move because I was terrified of that until I heard footsteps. And I looked up and it's my buddy. And I'm like, were you running around the back of the vehicle? He's like, no. And I'm like, did you see anyone? He's like, no, man, there's no one on the street. And then my mom comes up and I ask her the same thing. And she's like, no, there's no one here. You probably just imagined it. But I saw it.
And you remember it clearly?
And I remember I am
still?
53 and I was 5. So I was 48 or 47. I was 48 or 47 years ago. And I still remember it. But
Same with Hatman.
right? And you don't forget something like that. It
No, I
just
guess
sticks
not.
with you.
Yeah.
And then you just start asking, well, what was that? And you start asking those questions, and then you start watching like In Search of and Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and then you start picking up every book on it. And the next thing you know, you're fascinated with that one incident sparked a whole, what was that? And why did I see it? And what's going on?
So following this 47 years of like looking into these sorts of things, what is the closest you've come to sort of landing on what that thing you saw might have been?
All the years I've done this and looked into it, and especially looking into it really seriously within like the last, 20 some odd years, whatever answer I get creates 20 more questions. And I think that's partly why I like it so much. I don't think there'll ever be a conclusive.
It's the mystery.
It's the mystery that's appealing to me. There's theories that have come up that I like the John Keel, talking about John Keel earlier. He believed that there are these things called ultra-terrestrials that have been on the planet for as long as people have.
Ultra instead of extra.
Yeah, ultra. They are on Earth, within our dimension, within our world, or one next to it, that have been here forever, and they interact with us for whatever reason, and they've evolved as we've evolved. So as an example that he would use is like, we see UFOs and we think they look kind of like spaceships and stuff. But back in like the Egyptian times, they called them chariots of the gods.
Right.
And then in the Victorian era, they saw like airships.
And then it became flying saucers.
Then it became flying saucers, and now it looks like, the high advance. They evolve as we evolve.
Right.
And they interact with us. And he cites cases of people that look like people, but they behave very straight. Like the Men in Black originally weren't like Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. They'd be really odd people. They'd talk odd. They'd dress funny. Like they'd have the suits, but the suits never fit right. And it's all part of the interrelated phenomena. And then Colin Wilson played on that. He was an author who wrote a book called The Occult. And he went into writing the occult book, wanted to debunk it.
Okay.
And all of his research, and some 500 plus pages later, he couldn't debunk it. He actually became more of a believer. He just called the whole thing Faculty X. The paranormal is a natural phenomenon on this planet. It's been here as long as the planet's been here. So before we were even here. And when we were living on the plains in our little isolated groups and had to hunt and gather to survive, we very much interacted with it and relied on it as a form of survival. And it's only when we started thinking we were more civilized and we got created like church and science and all this stuff, we stopped relying on it and started relying on all these other institutions we set up instead. But it doesn't mean it's not out there.
Right.
And we won't cross paths with it from time to time. And people who are a little more in tune to it, we don't know why, but it's here to interact with us, and we interact with it.
Where can we find all your cool work?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Do you have a website? Where's your documentary going to be?
Oh, the film Tracking the Wendigo premieres tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Pacific on the Small Town Monsters YouTube channel, where it's going to play for a while before expanding to other platforms. The book is out on smalltownmonsters.com, where you can order it off of Amazon.
Anything else of yours that people can track down and watch and stare at and read? Or
I wrote other books. Legend of Ogopogo is also available from Small Town Monsters. And then the first 3 books that Pete Wren and I wrote are available through Beyond the Fray Publishing or on Amazon as well.
Anything else you want to touch on, Jason?
I think we're good, Todd.
Before we go, first of all, thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much for having me on. This has been fantastic.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been good.
If you want to get in touch with us to maybe come and stream with you, because we are always looking for people to stream with, there might be somewhere on the screen, there might be a QR code that you can use to connect to a place where you can let us know that you're interested in streaming with us.
If you see their QR code, hit it, because they will come and tell your story.
And maybe there'll be a QR code, maybe there won't be. If there isn't, it's not our fault. Thanks for joining us, everybody.